NunesMagician. He settled for
Hey, it looks like we're live. Yep, we are. For some reason, the audio is playing again in my headphones and screwing things up. Hey, welcome to Tech Difficulty Sundays with the Tri-Nunes and Absolute Live cast. With you as always, Steve Haller. Yeah, we'll just go with it. After watching these last couple of ELM endings, nothing makes sense. So, without further ado, I'm Steve Haller. With me, as always, Andy Pregler and Christian Guzman, and we're gonna talk about things.
Yeah, we are definitely going to talk about things, especially with the Syracuse Golden Eagles, Red Storm, Cyclones alumni team that we have going here.
As the great Kevin M. Wall, who will gratefully subbed in for me last week, so famously said, "Isn't it great what happens when you have a real point guard?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So Syracuse did have a real point guard last season for their actual team, and we saw what happened when he left, because 750 of you commented on it.
Mm-hmm.
Forgot about
there
that
comes
one,
a
too.
time in all young Nunesers' life when you must write the article, and the article is the one that it's pretty basic. You didn't put a lot of work into it, but it kind of blows up. And yeah, that was yours. We've all had it, and this is a great time to circle back and remember that Syracuse has had a lot of really good point guards at under Jim Boeheim. Some of them are probably too old to play in the basketball tournament. A collection of not quite washed up, but getting close to washed up former collegiate stars who are now looking for some sort of European or G League deal. And Syracuse has also had many recent point guards who have had success. Probably Tyus Battle's a great example of a 2-turned-1. There have been a few of those. However, they are all succeeding overseas and do not need to play in this type of tournament in order to guarantee their next contract. So you get left in a situation like Boeheim's Army did, where you're either relying on a 2 who was never a 1 in somebody like Andrew Gillen, who I guess technically was a 1, but was at heart, in his heart of hearts, was a 2.
Andrew Gillen, who are you talking about?
Andrew White, the third?
Andrew White, sorry, there we go. That's
who you could have said could have worked anywhere from 3 to 1, and none of them were any.
I was thinking of John. I was thinking of John Gillen. Why did I said Andrew White? Because Andrew White and John Gillen together was just a scoring team with no defense. Jim Boeheim's absolute favorite type of Syracuse team.
That was a very interesting 2016-17 season that I had to cover.
Yep, and so that's the alumni group you're pulling from for this group. So you can understand why Boeheim's Army might have just hit the pause button and said, you know what, we got to go outside the family for this one. And I think it's worked out pretty well for those that are living under a rock. Boeheim's Army is in the TBT finals against Team 23, who I don't know if you guys have looked at Team 23, but it's basically Overseas Elite. It's Overseas Elite with a different name. And yeah, let's talk about Boeheim's Army before we get the Sunday scaries.
Well, it can't be Overseas Elite because we've got 2 of their most important players.
We do, which we should get into because they have done very well for us. DeAndre Kane and Tyrese Reese was he part of the Overseas Elite team as well?
Rice.
I don't believe
Rice. Yes.
I don't believe Rice was on Overseas.
Sykes was though, wasn't he?
Maybe, but I think
DeAndre
it was
Kane
just
was the main one.
Kane and Kennedy were obviously the big ones.
Yes.
Yep.
So let's start with those two because it's been weird because the last time we talked 2 weeks ago when I was here, we kind of said we kind of have to wait and see what happens with Boeheim's Army. Then last weekend happened where they took care of business, and then this weekend happened where they did not take care of business, but they won. And Kennedy has been a really solid player for them, kind of playing 2 ways. Steve and Christian, I'm going to throw it to Steve first. You've seen a lot of variations of Syracuse teams over the years. All of them kind of have the same basic formula of needing some kind of you need to have a 3 or a 4 who can do shit. And I feel like Kennedy is the kind of 3-4 who can do shit that Syracuse hasn't quite had since CJ Fair left. Specifically because he's got the size to back up the more physical game if the threes aren't falling.
And who's backing up DJ Kennedy? CJ Fair. Go figure. Seems to be working for the unit at this point. CJ's had a couple up and downs. He looked solid 2 games ago against Golden Eagles, I think. Who were the defending champions. But and forgive me if I'm off on some of this because I've caught like half of the last 4 games, but it depended on which half I actually caught. So saw the last 2 Elams, and then before that, like always, the Game Against Always a Brave, I literally fell asleep at halftime because I'm an old man. So yeah, one of those. But yeah, it seems like the makeup of what they put together with this squad almost fits some of the Syracuse of old type teams, where you have that kind of pivot at the 3 or 4, and a point guard that can kind of put things on his shoulders and then move forward from there. So it's nice to see that balance around the court that has been kind of missing between the front court and the back court, rather than just hang out on the perimeter and see what the hell happens like we've seen in recent years.
But the big difference is that this team rather would play man-to-man instead of zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also Chris McCullough isn't injured, which through this tournament we've seen what would have happened or what could have happened if that man had stayed healthy to wear orange more than 7 games?
Halfway through the season.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't even quite halfway. He didn't make it to conference time.
No,
right.
He played 1 conference game. I believe he was injured during a conference game.
Okay, so it might have been 11.
Because I know it was like first 2 weeks of January.
Yep. So
yeah,
either
that makes
way,
sense.
that would have been a very different team than what we ended up with that year had he had stayed healthy.
Yeah, and Christian, I think that's something that's been readily apparent in this team is that they're playing man to man. They're playing a more professional game, and Chris McCullough, we didn't get to see a ton of it at Syracuse because he got hurt so early into his career. He's a professional player. DJ Kennedy, professional player. These guys are not trying to take the college game and stretch it to fit the TBT format. They are playing what everybody else is playing, which is the Euro style NBA light version of basketball.
Which is what we've seen succeed in this tournament so well, and that's why you've had like the overseas elite guys and Kennedy and Kane really push to change this Cuse alumni team to fit that style and mold into that style, and that's why guys like McCullough are so effective in this lineup, and guys like Tyler Lydon aren't necessarily as effective in this lineup. And it's interesting because, again, remember in 2014, even if McCullough was healthy, Syracuse wouldn't have played in the tournament because sanctions, everyone's favorite. Yeah. But that would have been interesting to see how far that team would have gone, because that team, even if without McCullough, even if they were tournament eligible, was not making the tournament. That was an NIT team. But McCullough showed like why he was a first-round draft pick, albeit a late first-round draft pick. I think it was like 28 or 29 to the Nets, and he shows like okay, he still's got some hooping ability. I mean, obviously, like we said, this is what this tournament usually is for. It's for guys to get contracts already. Malachi Richardson's already got a contract for Italy next year, so he's already fed off some of that success. But like you guys said, this is fed off to the guys whose games are really, really suited to the pro-style game. And you're seeing that with the guys who are succeeding in crunch time minutes for Boeheim's Army.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I guess I'm going to throw it because we have a comment from the Peanut Gallery.
The Peanut Gallery.
Yeah, Mr. Michael Held is coming at us. Mike's coming at us with some hot takes here, and I quote, "Possible boomer take, and I'll accept it. It's kind of a bummer to see that we couldn't win it all with just alumni playing. Like I know BA has always had non-alum on the roster, but they weren't huge contributors. So, what? I guess from your orange of orange hearts, what's your take on that, folks?"
I would actually agree with that. Honestly, like but it's the reality of the situation. We know that the successful Syracuse guys, at least in recent time, haven't been necessarily the NBA pro-ready guys, and if they are, they're O'Shea Brissett and exceeding at a high level, and they're Jeremy Grant exceeding at a high level. So it's really like a boom or bust type of situation with the NBA Syracuse pros. They're either really good or not suited at all to the level of basketball that is required to win in a TBT. And if they are suited, if they're playing in the NBA already.
I think this is something that we have hit on this show a lot, so I don't want to sound like a broken record for Mike, who has probably tuned in when we've had this rant. But like, this is what happens when your recruiting falls off a table. And not that Syracuse has completely fallen off. We're seeing that it's starting to rebound. But the players that are now playing in TBT were a part of a lot of these classes where there was only one top 100 kid coming in. So when you're talking about these kids' talents, sure, not all of them are going to become, one of the 60 players taken in the NBA draft. But if you're a top 100 kid coming out of high school, you're one of the best basketball players in the country, which means that as you continue to develop, you'll still probably be one of the best basketball players, out there in the United States. And Syracuse, when this tournament originally started, the team was being fed with either old elite Syracuse basketball players who had run in the NBA, like Hakeem Warwick, and was being fed with a much younger group of guys who were key contributors to Syracuse teams, dropping 15, 20 points a night, were top recruits coming in, and just couldn't quite cut it because they were that weird tweener that Syracuse excelled at recruiting, where they didn't quite have the physical build to be a true NBA player, or their skill set was so limited in terms of shooting that they couldn't get an NBA look. And now what's happened with the Syracuse player pool that you're trying to pull from is all of those good players were the one good Syracuse player who ends up doing well in the tournament, gets drafted and has a pro contract, and the rest of them don't even get any kind of professional looks. And that's how you end up in a Boeheim's Army situation, where the pool of players that you can pull from include a Tyler Lydon who hasn't played basketball for over 18 months. And he's probably one of your best alumni players that was available. So I don't want to say that like this all comes back to being Jim Boeheim's fault. But like if your key conceit is to be a Syracuse alumni team, and the Syracuse team that you're trying to pull from goes through a spell where it's not very good, your alumni team is not going to be very good.
And I think a combination of two of the things you guys have brought up has been one of those key contributors. You mentioned the tweeners, Andy, and I think, Christian, you mentioned that the two guys that are contributing from overseas elite have filled holes that we didn't have on the between Rice and Kennedy, filled holes we didn't have on the roster. And that's kind of a function of, each of them are kind of a function of each other. We've gotten the recruits at that tweener position, but we haven't had a solid, deep swing, like post swing 3-4. We've had a lot of 2-3 kind of guys. We haven't had that 3-4 tweener, and we haven't had a true point guard. And being able to fill those gaps off of the roster to complement the alumni guys that we have had in that relatively shallow pool. I mean, your guys that would have filled the Kennedy role are both playing in the league. So what are you going to do? That's kind of where we've had to go to fill the gap.
Two things I want to touch on. One, to intentionally date myself. 2014 was my freshman year at Syracuse. The Syracuse basketball recruiting class was Chris McCullough and Caleb Joseph. Let that sink in for just a second. Yeah. McCullough was good, obviously, but then blew out his knee. And then Caleb Joseph was Caleb Joseph. And two, well, what's Frank Howard doing right now? Because I feel like he'd be a really good point guard in this system.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's a perfect example of somebody who, when he graduated as a senior, and he was somebody who just didn't quite have the makeup to get any kind of pro deal, so he stopped playing basketball. And it sucks, because I agree. I think Frank Howard at age 23, when he's right out of Syracuse, would thrive on this team. He'd be fantastic. The problem is that Frank Howard is now probably somewhere between 25 and 27, because I don't know his exact birth year. and hasn't played competitive high-level basketball since coming out of Syracuse. And so if you're Boeheim's Army trying to compete in a there's no pool play, there's no attempt to kick off any of the rust here. You have to have guys that are ready to go from day one. So you need pro-ready guys, and that's why you get a Tyrese Rice, who has been an absolute revelation at the point guard spot. And Steve, you've seen a handful of Syracuse point guards in our time who have been legendary, and you've seen a lot more Syracuse point guards who haven't been legendary. Rice feels like if he made another choice and went to Syracuse, he would have been in that like Tyler Ennis echelon of really, really, really good just below the greats. Instead, he went to Boston College and dragged that carcass of a program to a Sweet 16.
Yeah, and we in Pants on Head things today, we had people in the comments talking, like, comparing Rice to Sherm. And, well, I didn't see Sherm play. I am, well, technically I did. I just don't remember it. But and to be fair, they were talking specifically about that desire to take over in the clutch and that, extra gear, and that Sherm would have been the beast at the Elam ending that Rice has become, it seems to be. So it wasn't a total game comparison to Sherm. That would have been absolutely crazy. But yeah, Rice has kind of turned it on, and I think he may deserve an honorary 44 somewhere in the, like, slap an orange like the honorary degree somewhere on the roster there and call it a day.
Well, what school are you giving Rice's honorary degree from?
ESF with the joint.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, what the hell? Andy, you're muted. You gotta unmute yourself, buddy. That usually helps.
I was taking a sip of beer, and I didn't want you all to hear that slurping. No, I think Rice is one of the very few basketball players who went to a school that Syracuse competed directly against, and is now going to not have to ever pay for a drink in Syracuse again. Like, he's gonna, he's pretty set. Just, and this is the crazy part too, is that the Boeheim's Army, after this entire run, and we're gonna break down the games individually in a second, specifically the last two, because I think before they got here, Boeheim's Army was a good team, not playing great, but they were clearly the more talented team, so they advance on. This weekend was a different story. But this team is in the finals for only the second time ever in its TBT run, and they've done it on the back of a very balanced team. The last time that they made it to the finals, it was the Eric Devendorf show, which is not a bad thing at all. It's just that they were playing through one player. And while Rice has been fantastic, and has definitely been the clutch guy for them, they've gotten to the clutch moments through a very balanced team effort, with guys playing inside, McCullough chief among them, guys who force the defense to make tough decisions in Malachi Richardson, and then Rice, who's totally content to just be a true point guard. Like, hey, if I don't have a shot, until it gets to the Elam ending, I'm not going to take it. But so let's talk about the Elam ending. Specifically, the fact that I think neither of you are going to disagree with me. It definitely creates compelling basketball. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's better or worse than the current one, but it's definitely an interesting form of ending a game, and it makes it really fun to watch. But also, I do find it really ridiculous that the Orange in 2 games did not lead until it got to basically Elam ending time, and then just put the clamps on defense down and went for it. And I do think there's something to be said there for a team that can just kind of hang around, and then when you finally then when you do like the old school backyard basketball thing of, hey, the sun's setting, like, we're gonna have to wrap this in like 4 or 5 possessions, all of a sudden they're like, oh, now we can play. Now we can actually show how much better we are than everybody else. And I find that infinitely comical and the most Syracuse possible thing that could possibly happen.
If any of you guys have played 2K, they've activated their team takeover for the Elam ending. That's exactly what they've done. Just save it for that. And it's funny because, again, I mean, we've seen enough people tweet this during the week, but it's so typical Syracuse as well to kind of just lollygag around for the first 15 minutes of the game and then turn it on to create the cardiac cues that we all know and love and hate at the same time. And some things just don't leave Syracuse. That's one of them. But the fact, like you said, Andy, like what's so important is that you have guys like Richardson and McCullough and, well, at this point Kennedy as well, who may not always be on, but at least can score consistently enough to keep it somewhat close, which is, from what we've seen for Syracuse and Boeheim's Army, that's pretty much all you need until it's time to turn it on.
I think you were muted, Steve.
For the same reason.
Yeah.
So.
It's been really interesting, and I think, Steve, as I don't want to refer to you as the elder statesman, but you were the one who graduated before Christian and I did.
By default.
I graduated almost a decade before Christian got there.
Oh, goddamn.
I wasn't gonna put you on blast. I wasn't gonna do it.
Oh, man.
Playing with dates. You've gotten to watch and get used to now this whole tournament format that kind of pops along in the summer as something for us to do.
Yeah.
And you, as the resident who actually lives in central New York and gets to kind of feed off of this, how, for lack of a better word, or for lack of a better phrase rather, how does a deep run in TBA, like it definitely doesn't feel the same as a Syracuse basketball run, but it's nice to have something to do competitively that involves Syracuse over the summer. And I guess my question is, overall, like, Tuesday night, I'm assuming that people who have not been tuning in at all are just going to all of a sudden be like, where can we watch this Boeheim's Army game?
Yeah, I would assume so. I mean, you both know as well as anyone how much that team grips this town. That said, a lot of these faces and names are very familiar to a lot of these people. So I can, in my circle of friends, there's, a level of Syracuse basketball aficionados that are diehard into it, and then also those who are like, oh yeah, there's that thing where the alumni play. And I think getting to the finals will be that tipping point between the two, and, bring those who are like, yeah, there's that thing going on, maybe we should watch it, to, oh yeah, let's, 100% tune in, because a couple of alumni that we recognize have a chance at $1 million, and at the same time we'll tune in and realize that 3 of the 5 major contributors are not Syracuse alumni. So, especially with a name like Boeheim's Army.
Yes, he does tend to carry a certain amount of gravitas. And now my question is Weissman flying James Arthur Boeheim down to Dayton for the final? Because if so, man, this is just going to be all kinds of Syracuse level craziness that will be covered by the people by the ESPN broadcast who would love nothing more than to interview a crotchety old Jim Boeheim at halftime, because that'll play.
Oh yeah, they'd love it.
Weissman's definitely asked. Do you know that? He's definitely asked.
100%. But we should probably talk a little bit about Syracuse's opponent, who is Team 23. And if you've never heard of Team 23, they've been around for a few TBTs. This is actually their 6th year playing in, or they've been playing since 2015, and they made it to the championship game where they lost. But we should talk about what they did, because like Boeheim's Army, if you didn't catch it at the beginning, we grabbed some members of Overseas Elite, who is the TBT dynasty that won the tournament 4 years in a row. Team 23, much like Boeheim's Army, lost to Overseas Elite in a championship game. So sad. But what they then did this year was they went out and got the coach of Overseas Elite. So Mark Hughes, who coaches the G League Toronto Raptors 905, is the head coach of Team 23, and he's and won the last Overseas Elite championship as the head coach. So he knows what he's doing. The roster is filled with some Overseas Elite alumni, such as Raphael Putney and Dakari Tucker. And then it features former NBA players Walter Lemon Jr., Eric Griffin, Daniel Achefu, and it has some. I'm looking on the roster right now to make sure that there's no other Big East ties besides Achefu, who was at Villanova, if you don't remember him. But it looks like the rest of this team is going to be non-Big East ACC players, so there's not going to be a ton of familiarity there for people watching.
Mitchell played at Tech, I believe.
Mitchell?
Yep, Georgia Tech. Maryland and Georgia Tech.
Yes, yes, he is. Power forward at both, so yes. I don't know when he was at Georgia Tech, but his roster or his picture does have them in the Russell Athletic gear, so it was a few years ago. If you're a jersey aficionado and you remember the days that a Walmart brand sponsored an ACC program.
Yeah, he's the lineup says he's 27, so we would have had the overlap.
Yep. So there's going to be, there you go. Not a ton of familiarity there. I can't say that I've watched any of their games, but seems like there's going to be some overseas elite drama. And if we know one thing about the Syracuse team, Eric Devendorf's going to somehow start a fight between the two overseas elite alumni on both sides. So you can look forward to that.
Eric Devendorf's been waiting a while to shout at someone. He needs to let it out.
He let a little out at the Elam ending last night. That was.
Yeah, but it's not the same cathartic yell that he's probably looking for.
We're looking for a jump on the table. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Go.
That I was there at that one. I almost got in the middle of an Eric Devendorf fight. Did not want to be in that situation. He's a large man for still being who he is. But now that we've talked about a half hour about Boeheim's Army, Steve and Christian, we get to talk about our other favorite sport, the footy. Steve is rocking his American Outlaws jersey because tonight, it is tonight, correct?
Yes, tonight and
now actually
5 minutes. Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
The U.S. men's national team takes on the Mexican men's national team. The winner will be crowned the champions of North America because they will lift the Gold Cup. And the U.S. is starting Miles Robinson, Syracuse alumni, former #1 overall draft pick in the MLS Super Draft, #2 overall draft pick in the MLS Super Draft. Thank you very much. Very
Kyle
good.
Lara #1 that year, or am I? Yeah, that's
It was Kyle Laird, yes, who is now playing abroad after a stint with Orlando City. UConn, another a UConn legend, slightly edging a Syracuse legend, which my friend Tucker will not let up on, so I'm just going to move on from there. Steve, last time we talked 2 weeks ago, you, me, and Christian talked about Tajon Buchanan and Miles Robinson. We will get to Tajon in a minute. Miles, at the time, we were talking about him being in the mix for a starting center back position with the U.S. men's national team. It certainly seems as if as the competition levels have increased and the offense has not been there for the men's national team, Miles has continued to rise to the occasion and might actually become somebody that if he doesn't get the first crack at the other center back position, people will riot, which I did not think would be the case, but here we are.
Yeah, he's worked himself into quite the spot compared to where he was at the start of this tournament. He's definitely made a name for himself. He plays quite well next to James Sands, who's a much more ball at the feet type player. He can be the cleanup guy and let Sands be the distributor or carry it out of the backfield or whatnot. It's a role that fits him. The problem, like you're saying, if you put him and John Brooks in the same lineup, then you have not the greatest feet at the back. That's where Aaron Long always came in handy. He's hurt. Couldn't mute that one, sorry. That's where Walker Zimmerman would come in handy. He's hurt. That's where a lot of options could have come in handy that are not available for the men's national team.
I feel like that's just the theme of all of our team's fandom. This guy would be good. He's hurt.
He's hurt. Chris McCullough would have been great.
That's
he was
not
hurt.
with the soccer. That's across all teams.
Oh yeah, 100%. And it's basically Mackenzie Miazga, Brooks, and him that are kind of in that healthy and available for the next set of games. Chris Richards, I think, is out too. So there you go. He's hurt. So Miles, even without all the injuries, Miles' performance during this Gold Cup has moved him into a spot that's pretty impressive for where he started out at. Like I said, he was probably maybe 8th or 9th on the depth chart between some of the European guys, and Zimmerman ahead of him probably in MLS. And then he just has been playing very, very well, be it a 3-back spot or be it a 3 center back formation, or a pairing with a traditional 4-man back line. And it's been very good to see, him kind of rise to the occasion. So we'll see if he gets some offers from Europe. We'll see if he ends up staying with Atlanta. What ends up going on out of that? At least the end of the season, I'm sure he's hanging out in the friendly confines of Atlanta, and then we can go from there to more transfer speculation in the fall and see what happens.
Always our favorite topic, but yeah, I mean, when you look at it, it's Brooks. When everyone's healthy, it's Brooks, Long, and then after this cup, it's probably Miles, which is again.
I'd put Richards in there too, but yeah.
Richards, yeah, but didn't think we'd be saying that after the Gold Cup,
yep.
But that's very good. And yes, it's maybe against quote unquote weaker competition because they just had the Nations League, and you send everyone out with the big players at the Nations League, and so everyone's sending out the B teams here at the Gold Cup. But still, he's showing he can hang, and that's been coming for Miles, and we've seen him slowly progress ever since he got out of Syracuse, and finally he's getting a chance that we can all agree on he wholly deserves.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of some of the teams we've seen have been that B side. Mexico is a pretty close to full strength squad, to the point where Carlos Salcedo was benched because of his performance, and he would be he's not starting tonight, and he would normally be right there. So they're taking this seriously.
What is this Mexican team? Let me look at that.
Well, I can guarantee you this: you should probably plug your ears anytime that the U.S. is taking a goal kick, because the fans are going to yell something horribly offensive, and that's pretty much all I need to know about the Mexico national team at this moment. But the other Miles, obviously,
we're going into this because Miles is going to have Funes Mori, Tecatito, and Pineda running at him. And that's going to be a bit of a
Jonathan
test.
Dos Santos, Hector Herrera, Jesus Corona, Funes Mori, that's a good Mexican team. Holy crap.
Yeah. Yeah, and Efrain Alvarez is on the bench, Salcedo's on the bench. They're doing solid. They're bringing their A team or close to it. Pizarro's on the bench.
Yeah. Pizarro's also on the bench. I didn't see that. Oh,
yep.
God.
And Pulido. So, it's outside of Chicharito being hurt, that's about their full-strength squad.
I mean, Chucky Lozano also, but that's besides the point.
Right, yeah, he wasn't coming back from anywhere in Europe.
Which is this. You know what the best part about this is? We firmly now established that Mexico is brought their A team and is one of the best teams in this tournament, which makes what Tejan Buchanan did against them all the more impressive. Canada played Mexico in the semifinal leading up to this match. They were eliminated, hence why Mexico is now playing Team USA. And Tejan scored Canada's only goal of the match, was clearly the offensive engine. Kamal Miller also played pretty well in the Gold Cup knockout rounds, but Tejan Buchanan has really been the breakout story of the Gold Cup. Partially because he has the MLS connections, so the MLS is taking this as an opportunity to point to another young star that developed in the confines of the American Professional Soccer League. But then the other part of it is that Tejan's actually done something that a lot of people didn't think he could do, because without Alphonso Davies, Canada really became a one-trick pony of Tejan, do something. And he did a lot of things. And I think it's become the worst-kept secret in the world that New England is going to look to sell him, because they now have a ton of European offers willing to overpay for him. He's not a designated player, so they will make a very tidy amount of millions off of his sale. And I think that this is just a great opportunity for him as a young professional. But the type of player that he is this kind of newfangled winger. Steven, we see it happen at the college level with what Coach Mack tries to do with this team. But Tajon is really somebody you can basically play anywhere on either wing, whether it be a wing back or whether it be a more traditional attacking wing. And he's got the athleticism to cover not just box to box, but to do something in the opponent's box, as we saw against Mexico, where he made just a little brilliant move, but it got him just enough space that he was able to take what looked to be a really dumb, like a wide angle shot, and it was exactly what he needed to do to get it past the goalie and net the goal.
Yeah, and anyone who remembers him at Syracuse, he was an out-and-out winger or number 9 even on numerous occasions, like most of the occasions.
I remember him more as a 9.
Yeah, it was more
system.
Yeah, it was more rare to actually find him out wide. He would drift quite a bit, but he was primarily a true striker. And when the Revs started playing him, foot on the touchline, it was like, okay, he did that a little, and then the more you see him out there, the more comfortable he is. And like you said, he has that athleticism to shift him back, allow him to cover some ground, and play either a true wide midfielder, a winger, even a wing back at various points, or what they're supposedly looking to do with him in Europe via various reports. Likely that's just because he is a Canadian who is fast and plays wide, because it worked for the last one of those they tried it with. So we'll see what happens in the Alphonso Davies school of transfers.
It also helps that the last Canadian that they did that had to learn under one of the best left backs in the world.
Yeah, so that comes in handy.
That usually comes in handy when you're trying to convert a winger to a back. But also, like, the thing about Max formation that is so unique as well is that it's a 2-striker formation. So his strikers aren't always playing centrally, unless you're like Johannes Peels, who only plays centrally.
Right.
But like when you have a player like Tajon and Raposo as one of your 2 forwards, you can use their speed to drift out wide a little bit, like you saw with both of those players at Syracuse. So they have that experience of getting out near the touchline and playing up and down the wings and using their speed to their advantage, which is what we've been seeing with Tajon, and his creativity on the ball, like you saw in the Mexico game, is something that, again, is really, really attractive to the European clubs. Now, he may be a little bit too thin, in my opinion, to maybe switch back to the defensive back or a wing back role, but he's definitely shown enough offensive prowess to stay as a winger and an offensive winger to develop in one of the lesser European countries that are considering him right now.
Yep. Yeah, and like you were saying about that formation, Mack will switch from that, basically 3-4-3 to, like, when he had Peels, and 2 true wingers with Hilly and, was it Raposo on that team? I can't remember.
I can't remember. Yeah,
they blend into each other at this point. But
yeah, Steve and I are at the point where all the rosters blend together at right now.
Yeah. But you'll see, if there's someone that can play closer to a true 10, you'll see that 3-4-1-2 with 2 strikers deployed above someone, or he'll play, a number 9 above 2 wingers. So it's relatively flexible on the attacking front, and also from what the wingbacks are tasked with doing. If there's a more defensive of the 2 wingbacks, one of them will shade back. You'll end up closer to, a traditional 4-man backline, even without it guaranteed. There's some nuance to what Max seems to throw out there on the pitch, depending on his personnel, and even in game, depending on personnel, he's been known to show a couple of different things.
Yeah, that formation, it starts out as 3-5-2. And then it can shift. I've seen it shift to a 4-back. I've seen it shift to 5-back and have both of his wingers just play back and stay back. And then there was one point in one game where Matt completely abandoned that idea, and then for the second half of the game just played 4-4-2, which I thought was just so funny because it's just so English.
Oh yeah.
To go like, okay, we're going back to bog standard 4-4-2 here. And it wasn't like the diamond formation that like was popularized by Cruyff. It was
Oh no,
like
we're
the flat,
like Bruce
flat
Arena
four
4-4-2.
midfielders. Yeah, which was just so great to see during the game. I'm like, oh yes, back at its natural form. But like like you guys said, like the system allows for creativity because it's supposed to confuse opponents. Like really, the only guys that are stable, the only real guy that is stable is the number 6.
Yep.
Which is why Mac is always shouting at whoever his number 6 is. But
Yeah.
the creativity that he allows for his other forwards and the wingers is really what allows him to flourish.
You know what? This was a great segue because you know what came out this week? The
Oh, God.
men's soccer schedule.
Yes.
So Steve will obviously break this down a lot further on the NunesMagician site sometime this week because this is what Steve does. But at a highlight, the men's fall schedule will start on August 14th with an exhibition against Canisius, and they will play 2 other exhibitions against Siena and Rutgers. The Rutgers one will be on the road in some capacity, with the first official 2021 home game coming against Drexel on the 26th. From a high level, the Orange will be facing 5 different teams who were a NCAA tournament team in 2020, and they will be hosting the 2019 national champions and eternal rivals Georgetown in their third home game or in their third game of the season. And perhaps what's more exciting for somebody like me who does not live in central New York is that by my count, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games that will be nationally broadcast on the ACC network. Oh, no, sorry, they're just ACC games, not ACC network games, but they probably will be on in some. I'm really hoping that they get more games on like the big boy ACC network versus just the ACC streaming option. But that is a dream to have later on. Steve, from a high level, we know that the ACC schedule is going to be a gauntlet as always. This year, it looks like Syracuse has Virginia, Louisville, Duke, Pitt, NC State, BC, Clemson, and Wake Forest. What I know about those teams is that everybody except NC State and Pitt are traditionally soccer powers, and Pitt got good all of a sudden.
I don't know what happened
hell of
to
an
Pitt.
ACC schedule.
Yeah, that's a grinder.
That happened out of nowhere.
It just, hey, Pitt's great last year. Okay, cool. Yeah. They had shown a couple of signs over the past couple of years of being able to break through, but it just culminated in, oh shit, they're good. Now what do we do? At NC State, home against BC. Nope, strike that, reverse it. Home against NC State, at BC are probably the 2 that you're going to circle as far as being able to get a result out of, if possible. Home against Louisville, home against Duke, solid. At Pitt, depends on what we see early in the season. If it's the Pitt from last year, then away is going to be tough. If it's Pitt from years past, then okay, sounds like a W. Clemson, for some reason, Syracuse and Clemson in soccer seem to always have a ridiculous game. I would, if you're in the Syracuse area, circle that on your calendar and get up to the stadium on October 23rd. It's a Saturday. It's 7 p.m. It'll be under the lights. It'll probably be cold as shit. Go check it out. It's probably going to be worth it. At Wake,
Isn't the day before
Godspeed.
that the actual like Clemson football game, or is that am I a week too early?
That might be a week before. Great podcasting here.
Yeah, I'm a week too early. Never mind.
Oh,
Yep.
that would.
That would have been so nice.
But back-to-back night games against Clemson and concurrent weeks. So
Yeah.
all in all, the out-of-conference looks manageable. The Georgetown game is its own animal. Again, they had a couple of down years in there. We've played them tight. For some reason, in the postseason, we can't play against Georgetown. It just never works. So maybe during the regular season we can knock it out. But beyond that, everything else looks like solid filler games.
Yeah,
Cornell is interesting. We usually don't go at Cornell, so heading
that's
down
my
to
birthday.
Ithaca is pretty interesting. But then obviously the games that you're like, oh crap, we have to go on the road to face these guys at Virginia, at Pitt, and at Wake Forest. That's like,
Yeah, no,
at
not
least
great.
at least you have Louisville at home, which is like a little bit of solace of like, hey, maybe you'll get something there. Yeah, at
If I'm
home.
gonna get beat, at least I can go sleep after.
Yeah.
I was gonna say the whole that backstretch, the back-to-back Clemson Wake Forest games to end the year as you're competing for for a ACC championship specific seed is kind of, that's a gut punch right there. But at least you get NC State, BC to kind of warm up for those, and they've got the Colgate game as well. Not saying Colgate's bad. Colgate can have good teams, but it seems like there's the schedule is set up to kind of, after that Duke and Pitt game, you've got Vermont sandwiched in between them, Colgate, NC State, BC to kind of not necessarily lick your wounds, but figure out how to get right before those last two games. The ACC, according to the article put out by Cuse.com, the ACC championship will start on November 3rd. So that looks like Syracuse is setting itself up for, a week off before the ACC tournament would hypothetically begin. And obviously this year's team is trying to get back to the NCAA tournament after last season's disappointment, but last season's schedule was all sorts of wonky and weird. And so I think overall, this is going to be another up and down season, Steve. I'm looking forward to your recaps explaining how and why we get there. But there's post-COVID, nobody really knows what's going to happen. So I guess we're going to have to, those first few games against Drexel, Penn State, Georgetown, Niagara will kind of give us an idea of what we can expect as we go down to Virginia, and whether it's going to be like a nervy 2-1 defeat, or whether we're looking at just like, packing 11 behind the ball and just trying to hold on to, don't allow any goals, don't give up any, or don't score any goals, don't give up any goals, and ultimately lose 1 or 2-0.
And I'll pitch hit for Steve in some of those games as well, for the games that he can't make at the soccer stadium. But again, if you just want to remember how weird the NCAA soccer season was last year, Marshall is your defending national champion.
Yeah, that's normal.
Forgot about that.
Totally normal. Nothing to see here.
Absolutely nothing to see here. Yeah, we're gonna hope that 2021 gets them back to normal.
That said, the split season I did quite enjoy, and that's something that I wish they would look more towards to prepare these guys for playing in the next level and that sort of thing. Like, not have to put as many condensed games in as small a time period as possible.
Yeah, the September schedule is like jam packed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're doing like two, sometimes like effectively 3 games in 7 days.
You start out in September, Friday at Georgetown, then the following Monday against Niagara, Friday at Virginia, Tuesday back home against Binghamton, Friday against Louisville, Tuesday at Cornell, and then Saturday versus Duke, Tuesday versus Vermont, and that's just in September. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like, I think that's 8 games, if I did my math correct, in September, which is like nuts.
Yeah, that's not great. I mean, fixture congestion is a thing, and these guys aren't getting paid to play, and you're running their bodies down doing what you're doing. Yes, you have the excuse of unlimited subs running time or stop time and all that. It's not.
Yeah.
Doesn't do it. Like, there's a reason that
these kids can get paid. Who's the first soccer player that's getting an NIL deal?
Ooh,
I'd like.
Question.
I was gonna say I haven't seen any of them so far, but I would assume that we're gonna get one coming soon. Once the season gets closer, I feel like you'll get the more seasonal NIL endorsements coming.
I feel like Hilly'd probably be up there on the list of people to get an endorsement, or local stuff. You could go with CC.
Yeah, Pagano probably gets a local deal at some point as well.
Yep. So we'll see how that goes. On the all-name team, we do have a freshman defender, Zephin Brockert-Kress.
Yep.
Ooh.
So
want that jersey?
Yeah, that needs an all-name team mention.
There's a lot
Kenny
of
Clapp as well.
All-name nominations here.
Yep.
can't wait for the social media post introducing us all to them, because Syracuse men's soccer social media is arguably one of the better social medias that exist out there.
Very
Although
true.
I do miss Fergus, and we all miss Fergus.
No, we all miss Fergus. You kidding me? God.
I
It's
even
so
named my
beautiful
dog
what he
after
did.
him. Not really, but it worked out. Fergus, if you're listening, I named my dog after you. Had nothing to do with the Thomas the Tank Engine character that my son said. No problem.
Gonna go with that. You know who you should name your dog after if you're looking to do it? Katie Zaffaries. Katie Zaffaries is a Syracuse cross-country track alum who has now won 2 medals at the Tokyo Olympics. In the individual women's triathlon, she finished with a bronze medal, and then in the team mixed relay for the triathlon, she finished with the silver medal. So this means that along with I'm making sure I grab her name, the Syracuse softball player on Canada, Jenna Chiara, that means that Syracuse now has 3 medals in the Tokyo Olympics, which is tied for the highest overall Syracuse medal count in an Olympic.
Ooh.
And the good news is that there's probably going to be more, because Kayla Alexander is on the women's basketball team. Jeremy Grant is on the men's basketball team. Both of those teams are expected to podium. And while we can probably expect Kayla to come back with a team gold, we can probably expect Jeremy to come back with a team silver or gold now that Kevin Durant wants to play basketball. When it comes to individual golds, Justin Knight is probably your last chance, technically speaking, as the other 2 are not competing in individual events. Justin Knight, who is known for his performance in the 5K race, will not be doing that at the Olympics. He will only be racing in the 1,500-meter race. There was actually a great profile on him that I retweeted this week from a Canadian publication. It wasn't Vice, but it was a site kind of similar to that. But they did a great profile on him where there are anecdotes where he actually almost missed his Olympic qualifying race because he was downloading the Drake album and listening to it the night before. He keeps a bib from a race where he finished dead last after going pro, because he was not eating healthy and was not doing good pro athlete habits. And so he's kept that bib with him everywhere that he goes as a reminder to never do that again. And it just kind of shows the kind of personality that Kevin kind of was screaming from the hilltops to tell us about. He's a really good kid. He's got a definitive personality that's all his own, but he's also insanely competitive. And it seems like, just from some quick looking at the field, Justin's times are not that far off from the podium. He would need to run a personal best in order to hit the podium, but it's not unrealistic to ask him to do so for the Olympics. So that is taking place, I think, on Tuesday. So if you're watching the Olympic coverage on Tuesday, that should be when you see Justin run.
7 a.m.
Oh, that's an actual reasonable time.
Yeah, not 4 o'clock like the women tomorrow.
Oh,
Yeah, God.
yeah, these Tokyo times are not fun.
No.
But for those
The only
who do
thing
watch-
worse,
Rio time's a lot
the
better.
only the only thing worse I remember was the 2002 World Cup.
Oh, God,
and-
Korea.
Yeah. Thank you,
yeah,
South
and
Korea.
Nunes was actually good in that one.
Oh yeah, no, and that was the problem, was waking up at ass o'clock to watch those games. Yeah, fun times.
I didn't know pro soccer existed back then.
That was about right.
You're just really hitting Steve left
Yeah.
and right here.
Just haymakers.
The other,
You'll like this, Steve. The first World Cup, like I remember physically watching, is the 2010 World Cup.
Yeah, 94 for me.
Steve, I was 2 years old.
Yeah, Christian wasn't.
The 2010 World Cup is how I became a soccer fan, because I immediately bought FIFA 10 after that.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
I met Steve. I was almost at the moment where I fully went in on soccer when I met you, which was the 2014 World Cup. That was, yes. I still remember my fondest memory of that World Cup was sitting with a bunch of ACC mascots in Louisville during Louisville's Welcome to the ACC event, which got co-opted by the U.S.-Belgium game. So they had this whole downtown setup ready to go to like introduce Louisville to the ACC, and nobody there gave a flying F about Louisville's announcement. They just wanted the USA-Belgium game on, so they acquiesced and were like, fine, we'll postpone the event for like 3 hours until the men's soccer game is over. And they put the World Cup game on a big screen. And so they just are like, they don't want you out there.
Yeah.
So why don't you all just sit in the back of this bar that we shut down, that's serving everything outside. We'll just put you all in the back room and put on the TV, and you guys can all watch the game. So I watched that. I watched Wando completely whiff.
Oh God!
We're all like half in mascot suits.
Yep.
All like it is the dumbest sports memory that I have by far and away. Which is a great segue, because that was the last time conference realignment happened, and it's happening again, guys. It's official. Oklahoma and Texas are leaving the Big 12 in 2025 to join the SEC. Ultimately, the ACC will be impacted. You and Kevin, you guys both went down this rabbit hole with Kevin. I don't feel like it really needs to go down anymore. But now that it's official, Christian, do you have any teams that you'd like to see the ACC grab more than the others?
Hawaii.
Cool.
Spoken like Dino Babers himself.
Yes. So honestly, I mean, the obvious one is West Virginia, and like, it's probably like one of the worst kept secrets in all college sports that West Virginia will join the ACC at some point. And it just kind of fits. I do like the idea. I'm not sure how much they would add athletically, but I do like the idea, at least academically. I think Kevin brought this up last week, of maybe trying to convince Northwestern to come in. That might be interesting.
Battle of the journalism schools.
That too.
I think Northwestern's really interesting, because I do think it gives the ACC, they do fit the ACC better than they fit the Big Ten. However, Northwestern also realizes that you can be a loser in the Big Ten and make a ton of money, or be a loser in the ACC and make a little bit less ton of money, but it's still less ton of money. And Vanderbilt is in the same boat, where they're not going to give up the SEC paycheck, even though they will never, ever be good at anything other than baseball in the SEC. I think it's interesting, but it also does become a more interesting conversation of what the other conferences do on how it impacts these smaller schools and these Big 12 schools, such as the Big 10 continuing to double down on big land grant state schools, and a place like Northwestern just doesn't fit the profile anymore, and the Big 10 kind of asks them to leave versus, them leaving of their own volition.
Yep.
All of which is possible because conference realignment doesn't make any sense. Steve, you've now lived through a lot of conference realignments. As a Syracuse fan, this is the first time that we should not be in the center of it, at least in terms of speculation of leaving conferences. We seem to be pretty safe in the ACC. What would be your dream scenario here if the Big 12 falls into a crater never to be seen again?
Before Steve goes, you guys talk. I'm going to be right back.
Go for it.
Okay, that worked. That's if they fall off into oblivion, that's going to be a big question. Because for one, I feel sorry for Sarah, who our former colleague Sarah Stanley just moved on to the Big 12 and hopefully is still going to be there for a good bit. Hopefully the entire conference doesn't implode for her sake. The rest of it, I don't really know. Do they raid further west and try and bring in some, Mountain West talent, some Pac-12 guys, like do something else to change the footprint a little? It's two anchors for them that are gone, so it's a pretty tough. You can't really make that up. It's a matter of, I guess, acquiescing to where they are and trying to figure out the best bet to go from there. You're muted.
Yep, I just realized that again. I think the bigger issue, or the bigger question mark becomes, like, if there is another wave of realignment, as we continue to talk about the NCAA losing its power. I was having this conversation with my wife because she just didn't understand why schools wanted to realign. And you have to come down to the really silly argument that is, like, conferences really don't have any power over their schools. Conferences are just there so that the money can get pulled together in even more ridiculous sums. Mm-hmm. And they don't actually have any authority over the school. They don't anytime that a conference tries to do something to a school, it never really works out. They kind of just exists to allow the schools to continue to make the most craven amount of money possible. And I really genuinely wonder if the implosion of a Big 12, because their two biggest schools wanted a bigger piece of the pie, finally gets the other Big Four to say, okay, we need to make sure that we're bigger than our biggest schools. Because that's ultimately what this comes down to, is that in the SEC, it's a little bit different because those schools can rise and fall very quickly. Alabama's a great example of this. Pre-Saban, they were just another SEC school with a name but no real results. The Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12 definitively have big schools that if they left would leave the conference spinning. Is that likely to happen? Probably not. But it does start to become a question of, if you're the ACC and Clemson suddenly decides that it wants a bigger piece of the revenue sharing, or it's going to go to the SEC, how do you handle that? And what do you as a conference do to ensure that you don't get Big 12'd? And I think that, to me, is the more interesting question coming out of all this, versus which school will Syracuse add to its annual rotation.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And one thing we will now know officially is that per Stephen Bailey, running back Jawar Jordan has officially transferred to Louisville.
Yeah.
I think I know why, but
Yeah,
really?
I just saw that also. Yep.
Was he even in the portal?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah,
always in the
from
portal.
last season.
He never left the portal. Huh.
No.
Never left the portal.
So yeah, we get to play against Jawar Jordan this year. Yay.
Ugh.
We saw what our run defense was last year. Yay!
Oh,
This
boy.
is really upsetting. So I'm assuming that, and this is pure speculation, this probably meant that we knew that Abdul Adams was probably going to be at the same level as him. This probably means that Adams is higher up than him as the backup running back. And I think, Christian, you were the one that was mentioning Dino Babers kept calling out, was it Trevor Pena? No, not Trevor Pena.
Cooper Lutz.
Cooper Lutz.
Honestly,
Yeah.
Lutz might be the 2 on the depth chart. I would not be surprised. Whenever we get a depth chart, because God knows when we're going to get that. But whenever we get a depth chart, I would not be surprised to see Lutz at the 2.
And why is that?
Because Dino said, especially back in March, I had asked Dino at a press conference back in March, because you have Adams and Howard coming back, where do these guys fit into your depth chart now? I know you have Sean Tucker and you do have Lutz. We didn't know Jordan was going to be transferring at that time, but where do they fit in the depth chart? He told me they go right back to the bottom and they have to work their way up. And given how much he loves talking about Lutz, I wouldn't be surprised if, as good as Adams and Howard are, I'm not going to be surprised if Lutz is still holding that role, because for the main options of what Lutz brings as a different running back, he's a pass-catching running back, and he can actually block decently as well. We've seen him pull off a couple of decent blocks as well, and as Steve harps on all the time, the running back blocking is so important to making this system work well. It's still something that Tucker didn't have last year that much.
Yeah, and that's it's a gap that you already have so many bodies filling it. It makes sense.
Yeah.
He was injured. He was injured last year. That's what caused Tucker to become Tucker. And apparently coming off of it, he figured he was behind 4 guys. So I guess it kind of makes sense. So it's going to be a pain in the butt to play against him. But, more power to the guy for going where he can get more PT.
Yeah, that's you could tell that was the main reason why Jordan left, because he knew he wasn't getting past Tucker in the depth chart.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it's tough to sit from this perspective because we're not in the locker room, we're not seeing it. Tucker did not play every game last year. He did get hurt. He plays a very physical style of running game that I would assume makes him more injury prone, which is why Dino wants to have a more complete running back room, not just in case he goes down, but to be able to spell him more over the season. And it does become very interesting, if you're right, Christian, that Lutz has kind of surpassed everybody that we expected, or at least started at the number 2 and hasn't given it up. Because I do think that Lutz is a nice change of pace. Adams and Jordan were probably more of, at least in my mind, a complete version of the player that Lutz aspires to be. But we did see plenty of flashes last year when he was healthy, that it could be done, and that he's got some really nice upside that we could use on this team's offense, especially considering that we'd like it to be less deep ball oriented in terms of just throwing it deep to Taj Harris.
And the big thing again with Tucker is that he doesn't have a ton of stamina. Like, I think, just spitballing off the top of my head, the most amount of carries he's had in a game is 12. And especially with how much Dino wants to develop the run game, you'd want to have your leading running back get over 20 carries in a game.
Yep.
So the fact that he's only the fact that he produced the numbers that he did on 12 carries a game is pretty impressive in general. But 2, imagine what he could do if he builds up his stamina, maybe gets a bit more consistent with his run blocking as well, so that he can stay in for the extra possessions and the extra snaps. That's what you're seeing with Tucker right now, and I think that Dino has the faith that he can improve on that, which is why you see guys like Jordan, who have the talent to be a D1 running back, in the mid, not necessarily stick around.
Yeah, it's. I'm glad we got some breaking news in the show to wrap up the football version of the episode, and we don't have to wait a week to talk about this. But as you mentioned, we are hoping to get some kind of football depth chart sometime soon, so that we can continue our Get to Know series, which is put on break as we've now run through the entire available Syracuse roster, even though we know that there are more players on there. So hopefully we get to break that down more this week. Next week when we get on the show, I'd like to be able to break down a depth chart as spring football kind of starts in 2 weeks. But
No, it doesn't.
I thought it started August 13th.
Spring football usually starts in the spring.
Oh, nope. Brain fart, not spring football, camp, a preseason, whatever it's called.
Camp works.
Even then, we're probably not getting a depth chart. Let's be honest.
Yeah. I'm expecting late Tuesday of pre-week 1.
Oh.
See, Steve and I are going to return to our favorite tradition of last season, which is constantly refreshing the game notes page.
Yeah. It's sit on a conference call and hit F5 just repeatedly until something new pops up.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell that we have some feedback for those who run the Syracuse athletic website?
I think it's subtle.
Well, we're going to go watch the remainder of the Gold Cup game, Gold Cup final, which is taking place in Las Vegas, so you can guess how that crowd is. Hint, based off of what I'm seeing on Twitter, it looks fun and rowdy. But for myself, for Christian, for Steve, for the rest of the News Magician crew, thank you as always for tuning in. For those of you who are watching live, if you are watching Monday morning or some other time this week, thank you for coming to NunesMagician.com and watching us whenever you can. Make sure you click the like button if you're on YouTube. Make sure you click subscribe to make sure that you get all the updates from across the Nunes Magician land. Ring that bell to get notifications every time we go live, which is pretty much every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're not really going to change that because we made it through almost the entire summer, and we clearly have enough stamina to do this during the regular season too. So we'll be here every Sunday night talking about Syracuse. Maybe we'll talk about depth chart. Probably talk about how we want to talk about depth chart, but we can't. And if I say depth chart one more time, it's going to lose all meaning in that asymptomatic asphyxiation or whatever it is from Ted Lasso that I don't remember what it's called. Which also, I need to watch episode 2, so no spoilers.
Same.
I haven't seen any of Ted Lasso because I don't have an Apple TV.
Go watch it yesterday.
I don't have an Apple TV subscription. That's why. So
we'll see what we can work out for you here.
Yeah, the Nunes
You've
team
got
will
people.
provide.
Does John compensate me for that?
Probably. It's worth it.
Yeah, if you can pay for Apple TV and Nunes bucks, then fire away.
Oh, okay.
The money cannon shall provide.
I'm waiting for Kevin to give me my Nunes bucks. I don't have that yet.
Don't worry, it comes through a portal, and you have to convert it to the 3 different types of Bitcoin.
Yep.
Takes a while.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you again, Steve. Take us home. Oh wait, I already did all that stuff, so I think you just have to say go orange now.
I was
you?
like, didn't that already get... Okay. In that case,
Ted Lasso.
go orange.
Somebody not watching Ted Lasso screwed me up. That's how badly it screwed me up.
Sorry, guys.
All right, we'll get Christian caught up this week, and we'll see you next week. Go orange.
Go orange.